You're now listening to the Peach Pundit Podcast, where we are expressing our own personal opinions. These views may not reflect the opinions of those whom we may be professionally affiliated. Welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. I am Scott Turner, and I'm joined tonight by the stalwart Buzz Brockway and a special guest, Bruce Thompson. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, Bruce. We're so excited to have you. Before we get started, though, I want to point out that we are up to 3 Patreon subscribers. Patreon.com/PeachPundit is where you can go to get your shout out by subscribing at a very affordable rate. So we're going to start out by saying thank you to Sam Thomas, Benjamin Hurst, and Reed Powell. We're up to 3, gentlemen, 3 paid subscribers. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of people who listen for free, these guys have stepped up to the plate. They've gotten their shout out, and we are grateful for them.
Hey,
we're joined tonight by a very special guest. Yeah, 200%.
I was just going to say we've increased by a third since last week, so it's growing by leaps and bounds.
Well, I know a lot more people listen than pay to listen, so we're grateful for those subscribers. We're almost at a point where we can pay for this software that we're using that makes us sound better. But that being said, we are joined tonight by a very special guest, Bruce Thompson. Bruce Thompson is state senator currently for Senate District 14 and is running for labor commissioner for the Republican nomination. Bruce, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Thank Buzz. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. It's an honor, and it's always good to see my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So tell us a little bit about what's your story? Why are you running for this position?
Sure. Well, Scott, much like you, I was not looking for an opportunity to be a politician. I was called into service and got in the Senate, and I believe I've made quite a difference. And along the way, we have noticed that we've had some real problems in other agencies. And prior to the pandemic, we heard a lot about some challenges with people getting involved with the Department of Labor and getting return calls. And then the pandemic just clapped that agency because frankly, they weren't ready. You and I know, Buzz, all of us, crisis management's what you plan for. It's not what you wait until it happens and then react to. And under the crush of the pandemic, that agency failed. And then we had millions of people that couldn't get their claims filled, calling many of us in the General Assembly. And then the media just started unloading with the stories of millions of dollars used on catered lunches that, frankly, people weren't even at work. We had the AAA bond rating almost being downgraded. We had those widows and some people on fixed incomes now being sued for receiving benefits that the Department of Labor helped them fill out. Now they want it back with penalties and interest. And then, of course, I'm being funny when I say my favorite, because it's not my favorite. But we have 2 employees or former employees being indicted federally for human trafficking. And along the way, Scott, we were looking for somebody to fix this. And many of my colleagues said, hey, you got a background in taking companies, dismantling, putting them back together. Can you do it with a state agency? And frankly, we tried to find somebody else to do it. And they just kept pointing back to me. So I said, let's go fix this thing.
Yeah, that is a true story, 100%. My last year in office with the pandemic raging at its peak, the number one constituent concern that I heard every day was about whether or not somebody could even just get an acknowledgement of a case that has been filed with the Department of Labor. I had more open cases that were over 60 days in my last 3 months in office than I had combined in the previous 7 years. And every time I called over there, they just basically stiff-armed me. They didn't want to give me any type of feedback. They didn't want to even acknowledge that these cases were open. And that was problematic because these people were facing foreclosure. They were facing losing their cars. They were facing losing everything that they owned and even trying to keep the lights on and the food on the table. And this government agency just was not responsive. And when I tried to dig in and ask questions, I was rebuffed time and again. So what are some things you plan to do when you take office immediately to try to fix the process?
Well, obviously, we've got to win on May 24th, right? And then again in November. But we are already working on interviewing software companies from around the country that have already gone into departments of labor around the state and modernized. This agency had an opportunity to do that 6 years ago, a federal grant, and the current commissioner entered into an agreement, then pulled out. South Carolina and North Carolina went ahead and completed utilizing the grant to modernize, and their response during the pandemic was much quicker. They had a lot less fraud. So to answer your question, we'll immediately go after modernizing that agency. Simultaneously, we need to go in and help them understand as employees, culture needs to change. They need to understand that you exist to serve the people outside. I've said this many times. This is not a dental office where you just call and schedule for a cleaning. It's an emergency room. People call you because they're in dire need. It's critical. And we've got to be responsive, which means open these career centers immediately. We need to make sure they're staffed. We need to make sure people are answering the calls live. You know that as well as I, Scott. Many of these people just got put on hold or just shoved off to a voicemail that was never responded. And so helping the culture understand that we're going to measure every incoming call. We're going to measure and record and then use for learning and also for accountability. How long you're on the call, how many people took live calls, and what the disposition of those calls are. And again, to start changing the culture. Once we get those claims down and get them under control, while we're restoring some credibility with the General Assembly, the executive branch, and then the people of Georgia, then I plan to work hand in hand with TCSG and workforce to be able to stand up a workforce that has been depleted, and it's killing our small businesses around our state. And there's 4 verticals we can work on: veterans, retirees, the apprenticeship program, and of course our incarcerated. Let's get everyone back to work and turn that agency into the biggest and greatest Indeed.com we ever did see.
Hey, Bruce, I've talked with some
Yes, sir.
Department of Labor employees with a project that we're working on at my day job, and there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of it seems to me morale might be low in that department. How do you what would your plan be to help restore morale? I'm sure there are some problems, but there's also a lot of really good people who are trying, but who busted their tails, but just were overwhelmed during the pandemic. And as you described, a system that that's probably not as efficient as it can and should be. How would you go about trying to restore morale?
There's a movie we all watched a number of years ago that I love. It's called Facing the Giants. And one of the players looks at the coach and he says, "Coach, attitude reflects leadership." You've got to have a leadership that is present. And the current administration, including the current commissioner and one of my opponents, who's a former deputy commissioner, were non-existent. And you've got to be present to be able to hear the challenges that your employees have. We do this in our business. If they feel like you're in the trenches with them, then they're okay. But when they feel like you put them in the trenches and you're off doing whatever you're doing, they feel alone. So first and foremost, let's be present. Second of all, let's get in there and find out exactly where the pressure points are and how we can alleviate some of that. And then I think you're going to find out whenever you go in and start measuring accountability, those that want to perform and they want to help people, they're going to rise to the top, and they're either going to bring people with them, or you're going to see some of that workforce be depleted, and we can replace that with, frankly, I have a heart to bring younger people in. And Scott, you and I talked about this. In my companies, I love getting young people, giving them a seat at the table, let them develop their mind and ability to be critical thinkers. You may keep them 3 or 4 years, and then they go off and do greater things. But if you can get them young and give them an opportunity to have a seat at the table and make a difference, it brings a fresh view to everything you do. So, Buzz, I would say making sure we're present, we're hearing from them, and then creating a pathway to be able to change that morale by actually leading.
When I complained to the current commissioner about my open cases, he pushed back pretty hard on me. One of the things he said was, well, the legislature hasn't funded me. And my reaction to that was, I've been in the legislature for 7.5 years. I have voted on 16 state budgets, and not one person from your office has ever showed up to say that you were under-resourced, underfunded, and that you weren't getting what you needed to do the job. Are you going to try to leverage your current relationships as a state legislator, a retired state legislator, to make sure the legislature is up to date on the needs of that department?
Absolutely. Hey, my first check, my first donation came from the appropriations chairman in the Senate. So when people ask about your relationships, Blake Tillery was one of the first guys said, go do this. So, I don't think we should, as fiscal conservatives, be throwing money at a problem. I think you should come and, like a zero-based budget, prove that you have the need and then rely on the people to be able to provide it. So providing some accountability within the agency and then handing that off either real time or at least in regular updates to the General Assembly. They can see the number of claims you're processing. They can see the time. They can see the disposition. Yes, I would come in on a regular basis and say, here's what we're doing with what we need. Here's what we need to be able to take that to the next level. Because the problem is when you have an agency head or a commissioner come in, and if they even did present that they needed more money, many times in appropriations, we just get a glimpse of like, okay, you've asked for it. Let's see what you're actually doing with what you have. And I believe I should be accountable to the resources as well. After all, it's taxpayer money, right? It's not free money. So yes, I believe we need to be properly funded. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think they're underfunded as I understand right now. The problem is they're just not very efficient with what they have.
Bruce, you've been campaigning for a number of months. You've been out there traveling the state.
12 to be exact.
Well, yes, it's a big state. You're meeting with lots of folks. What are on folks' minds? What are people telling you as you're out there and presenting your campaign to folks?
That's a great question. 71,000 miles as of this week we've traveled all over the state. And I don't mean by a plane.
Wow.
I mean, we may be driving a little faster than we need to, and it may be thinking we're flying, but we're driving. It's interesting. It started out a year ago where people were just complaining about trying to get through the Department of Labor. You know what the number one complaint is right now? I'm not sure I can keep my doors open. So you're seeing buildings, huddle houses, not waffle house, but huddle houses and fast food places and little supply places and printing houses across rural Georgia right now that are starting to get boarded up or they're just closed because of lack of resources. You know, it's one thing when you say, hey, you just have to work harder. And so you maybe expand your hours, you expand your services to be able to bring in more revenue when your costs rise. It's another when you do like we went through a Dairy Queen recently down in Brunswick area. And we pulled up. It was 15 minutes to get through the drive-through. I pull up. Young lady looked like she thought I was going to blast her. And I was friendly. I said, hey, how you doing? And there was an older lady in the background. I said, is that your owner? And she said, is there a problem? I said, no, I'm running for Department of Labor. I just want to talk to her. And the lady walked up, and she was one of the owners, and she said, you need to talk to my husband. And he came up, and he just kind of unloaded on government, right? And then he signaled to the young lady to come up that appeared to be 24, 25. She said, tell him how many hours you've worked in the last 2 weeks. 141 hours. And he said, it's unsustainable. If we don't get some help, we're going to have to close. And that's what we're seeing, Buzz, is it's gone from a frustration with an agency to get a call back to now, if we don't fix this and stop paying people to stay at home and then get a workforce in, they're going to lose their livelihoods. It's a bit of a scare. And now with the rumors of recession coming, you're going to wipe out entire families' legacies.
Yeah, man.
Well, Bruce, thank you for being on. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Tell us how people can get in touch with your campaign and if they need to reach you.
Well, first of all, I'd say to anybody that's on, thank you if you voted for me, because we are humbled by the number of people that have already said they voted. It's Bruce Thompson. GA.com is our website if you want to learn more. I am much like the two gentlemen on the phone or on this call or podcast. I've always given my cell phone out and been accessible. It's 404-660-1165. You can text me. You can call me if you can get me, because I may be on another call. But the main thing I would say is, as a veteran, exercise your right to vote and get out and vote.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Bruce Thompson, running for Labor Commissioner for the Republican nomination here in Georgia. Bruce, just remember to stay on until your cloud says you're done. And
yes, sir.
Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bruce.
Take care.
Yep.
And with that, we've got a very packed agenda.
Indeed.
And it starts because last night as we record this on a Wednesday evening. Last night was primary night around the country in several places. We saw a lot of different activities. One of those were the results coming out of Pennsylvania, and we want to try to talk about this in the lens of Georgia politics and how it has an impact, or does it have an impact, not just in Pennsylvania, but also North Carolina. In Pennsylvania, it looks like the Trump selected nominee, or the Trump selected candidate, rather, Dr. Oz, is coming down to the wire with another guy. And neither one of them are anywhere close to 50% of the vote, but in Pennsylvania, there are no runoffs.
Nope.
So whoever gets the most votes under that plurality, around 30%, they're going to end up being the nominee. And also in Pennsylvania, the Trump selected Mastricio. How do you say his last name?
Something like that.
The guy who wears spurs on his loafers, I'm told, it got about 45% of the vote and will be the Republican nominee for governor there.
Yeah,
powered by the Trump endorsement.
Yep.
And then we also saw Madison Cawthorn, who had been scandal-ridden in his last 6 or 7 months, just could not get out of his own way with all these different wild accusations about orgies and cocaine parties. He lost. North Carolina also does not have a runoff system. He came in with around 30% of the vote, and his opponent that beat him came in around 32, 33%. So there will be a new Republican nominee for Congress in CD 11 in North Carolina, and his name will not be Madison Cawthorn. So as we look towards Tuesday, where we have a slate of candidates that have been endorsed by Donald Trump, Buzz, how are you feeling about that type of influence on our races here?
Yeah, I mean, there was also, and I want to mention this because I think it helps us understand Trump's influence. The governor of Idaho, Trump had endorsed the lieutenant governor of Idaho, who was challenging the incumbent Republican governor, and the Trump-backed candidate there lost. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. Trump's endorsed candidates have had a tough time defeating incumbents thus far. Nebraska, the governor of Nebraska survived. Mike DeWine in Ohio, and now the governor of Idaho. But I think that, there's no doubt that Trump has an influence. There's no doubt about that. I think, he's helped Dr. Oz, obviously. And there were controversy around that, assuming that Oz holds on. Obviously, J.D. Vance a few weeks ago in Ohio, Trump gave him a bump. But, given that Trump has endorsed nine people in the state of Georgia, including 2 incumbent members of Congress, but he's endorsed challengers against quite a few incumbents. And I don't know. Polling in Georgia obviously doesn't indicate that Brian Kemp is going to lose. In fact, may win without a runoff. I don't think there's been any polling on Chris Carr's race for Attorney General or John King for Insurance Commissioner. So I know our friends at Insider Advantage are doing all they can to pump up the Trump, the Trump crowd. And trying to breathe life single-handedly into David Perdue's effort and all of the others. Vernon Jones, I don't know, they seem to be excited about all these candidates. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. I mean, obviously Herschel has a big lead, but he's Herschel. That has more to do with him. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag for Trump. And I think a lot of it really has to do with it seems to me that thus far the trend has been Trump has a tough time toppling incumbents, but does make a difference in open races.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting segue to kind of talk about David Perdue by launching off of the Insider Advantage propaganda machine. Insider Advantage, for those who don't know, is a conservative group of, they put out James Magazine as an example. They do polling. Matt Towery does polling, well-respected polling within Georgia as well. But
Absolutely.
since the beginning of this primary, they have openly been cheerleading for David Perdue. Even Matt Towery went so far in his first poll to lay out a strategy and a path to victory for David Perdue that involved Donald Trump spending time and money here.
Yeah.
Obviously, Trump came. He didn't spend the money. He didn't spend the time. And now we see David Perdue's campaign is really starting to sputter here towards the end. Yeah. Insider Advantage took exception to reports that were absolutely factual when it was reported that David Perdue only had three public appearances scheduled and nothing else between yesterday and the end of the campaign on Tuesday. 1 week, three things on the calendar.
Yeah.
David Perdue showed up to my town, Holly Springs, Georgia. He showed up to a Dunkin' Donuts to thank 5 people for going door to door for him. Meanwhile, Brian Kemp came through with Chris Christie and had over 100 people at an event up in Canton. That being said, Perdue reacted, right? His campaign team saw the criticism, saw the AJC article, heard us talking about it publicly on Twitter and Facebook about how it seems like he's already quit. And I said, that's a great thing because it means that we can begin unifying today as opposed to Wednesday of next week and start really blowing the doors off of this campaign and this primary. All that to say, they reacted and they went ahead and they booked as many events as they possibly could, released a new calendar. And here comes Insider Advantage saying, no, that's a lie. What the AJC said. There aren't 3 things. Now there are 15 things.
Yeah. And look, I mean,
be more obvious than what they're trying to do.
Those might have been in the works. I mean, you don't know. I mean, you look at Kemp's calendar, there's nothing publicly announced yet for Monday, but you know darn well Brian Kemp's going to be someplace campaigning on Monday.
There is actually former vice president of the United States, Mike Pence, is coming on Monday, and that has been announced. Yes.
Yeah.
And they'll do a fly around on Monday.
Yeah. But I think the bigger problem is Eric Erickson has been tweeting, obviously following this, and he's been tweeting that outside groups that had previously come in with some money to help Perdue are pulling their ads. I haven't watched a lot of broadcast TV, but I see Brian Kemp ads. I haven't seen many ads for Perdue. So, I think more troubling for Perdue, you've seen reports that he just doesn't have a lot of money and a lot of cash on hand for the last days of the campaign. So you can schedule events, but if you're not on TV, if you're not don't have these outside groups coming in to help you, that's a lot more troubling. And because you got to mass communicate if you're going to win. And Brian Kemp's got the resources and is doing it.
Yeah, and tirelessly, right? He comes to Canton. I got to go see him yesterday, Brian Kemp, in Canton at an event. It was his second of 3 or 4 stops yesterday on the big Kemp bus, and he does the whole hokey, fill up my diesel can so we can get to the next place fundraising appeal.
Well, these days that means something. So.
It's hokey, but but he's moving around the state, right? He's everywhere right now.
Yeah.
And he's out there every single day, crisscrossing the state in the big red and black Kemp bus. And he's bringing people with him.
Yeah.
Governor Ducey from Arizona was with him last week. Yesterday, Chris Christie was with him. I'm not the biggest Chris Christie fan as a, small government, Southern conservative guy. But it does draw people, right? It draws people because it's curiosity. Oh, I'm going to go see Kemp and Christie together.
Sure.
And Christie photobombed the governor and I as we were shaking hands, which will be one of the cherished photos of my entire life because it's funny. But there's no energy coming from the Perdue campaign to match that energy from the Kemp campaign right now.
Well, I guess, Sarah Palin's coming, right? I think that was announced. I first heard about it in Insider Advantage. So Sarah Palin's coming, but that's an interesting choice. Yeah,
Insider Advantage again, doing the work for the Perdue campaign, trying to do their best to prop up David Perdue and his flailing and failing campaign. Oh, boy. Other news. We know that Herschel's probably going to win. Is that, I mean, if you were a betting man, and I know you're not, but if you were a betting man, would you bet against Herschel Walker right now?
Not right now. No, I would not. No disrespect to other candidates in that race, but
yeah. I mean, I'm not voting for him. I've already declared this. You know, anybody who disrespects me as a voter by not showing up to debates, that's a big red flag for me. Like, if you're afraid to talk about the issues with your opponents, what is it going to be like when you're on stage with a guy who's been in office for a couple of years and has command of the issues that you clearly do not? So I've voted today, and I voted for somebody else not named Herschel Walker. But Gary Black said something interesting. He was quoted by Greg Bluestein at the AJC. Greg asked him point blank, "Are you going to vote for Herschel Walker when he's the nominee?" And Gary Black said, "No."
Interesting.
What do you think?
Well,
he said he went on to say that the reason why he was going to vote no is because he has not earned his vote, and that his history of abusing women was unacceptable to him.
Yeah. Well, I think, I was at an event, let me think, week and a half ago. I was invited by a guy I know to come to an event to see Gary Black. I went. And, look, Gary makes a strong case for himself. He is the only person in this race who's been elected statewide, and he's been elected statewide numerous times. And as he kind of went down the list of all the people he's received more votes than, and he makes a strong case for himself. So I think to me, him saying this, I wouldn't read much into it. I think if Herschel is the nominee, then Gary will help out and help him and line up with him, because Gary's a loyal Republican. But I think to me, this is just Gary fighting as hard as he can fight, with as much as he can fight to try to force a runoff. So,
we're seeing record turnout in early voting here in Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm going to read from Gabriel Sterling, who's chief operating officer for Secretary of State's office. And from his post yesterday, he said the Georgia record turnout update, 539,297 Georgians have cast their primary ballots. That was as of yesterday. Yeah. Early vote for the GOP was 288,000 plus 205,000 for Dems. And he went on and updated that today. He just tweeted not too long ago, within the hour, it looks like, as of 4:15 p.m., 58,255 Georgians early voted just today. I was one of them. Mm-hmm. With each voter, they are setting new records for early vote turnout. Dear Major League Baseball. Dear Major League Baseball.
We have the worst vote suppressors in history.
You owe Georgia an apology, and you owe us an all-star game.
Yes, they do.
Get to it, Major League Baseball. You bought into the lie that these laws were going to suppress turnout, that they were going to keep people from voting. It was going to make it harder for people to exercise their constitutionally protected right to vote, and it hasn't materialized. You owe us an apology, Major League Baseball. You owe us an all-star game. Do it. Get to it. Make it happen.
All right. So, Scott, do you think this signals that we're going to have some sort of insanely high amount of turnout when after May 24th is over and the polls have closed and everybody's cast their ballot? Is this going to be some sort of insanely high amount of turnout, or is it going to kind of even out and be sort of like a normal year?
It's hard to tell. I do think there's a lot of there regarding turnout being higher. People's passions are very high right now on any side of any issue, right? I mean, Roe v. Wade's probably going to drive some turnout. The news of that and the potential Dobbs decision, that's going to drive people. The left is being driven by this meme that Republicans are trying to suppress vote, and the best way you overcome that is turning out to the ballot. I will say, this is one of our our topics for later, but I'm going to move it up to right now. And that's 16,000 people, according to Mark Nisi at the AJC, have voted Republican. These Democrats, 16,000 Democrats, people who have pulled Democratic ballots in the past, decided to pull a Republican ballot this time. And Patricia Murphy over there at the AJC had a story where she contacted a few of them. You know, it's probably a really small sample size, but she didn't she didn't report that she talked to anybody that said that they were voting for the Trump slate to cause chaos. They were voting for Brian Kemp and his slate to prevent the influence of Trump in Georgia. They see that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I don't see it blowing the doors off. You know, it might set a new record, but I don't see it blowing the doors off. I think the way people vote and their behaviors around voting has changed.
Yeah.
And people have a desire to vote early now that they didn't have 10 years ago, as an example. So I don't think you can compare any other election to this one because the rules have changed. COVID has impacted people's behaviors, and I think it will level out some. I do think it'll be a record, but not by a huge amount.
No, I tend to agree with you. I had actually a reporter from Politico call me asking about the Secretary of State's race, and I gave him my thoughts, and he commented on that, noting that there were large numbers, and I said, and I tend to agree with you, Scott. I think one other factor is we're around, depending upon what county you're in, what school district you're in, or where your kids go to school. School is ending very soon, and in certain counties next week, school gets out, or school gets out this Friday in some places. I know myself, I'm going to be on vacation. We're going to hit the road and go on vacation. So I had to vote early if I was going to vote. So I think that's affecting behavior too, that folks are just saying, let's just get it over with and get out there and vote. And so.
About these 16,000 Democrats that are pulling Republican ballots, our Alabama cheerleader out there is calling them all MAGA voters, right? She's convinced they're going to be voting for the Trump slate. But I think if I was in a research organization, or if I was part of a campaign and had some resources to throw at this, I would be finding those people. If Mark Nisi could find 16,000 people that pulled different ballots, that's a repeatable task. I mean, that's something that you could do. Sure. I could do. Anybody else could do. If Mark can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah. Not that he's not talented, but anybody can pull that data. If I was part of a campaign, I'd be pulling that data and I'd be polling those people because that's a big X factor, right? Sure. I mean, that's not going to show up in any poll as a likely Republican voter.
Yeah. Well, think about it.
Is that a bad idea?
No, I think it's an awesome idea. And who do they vote for? And heck, if you're a Republican, I'd call them and say, can I win your vote in the fall too? If you voted for me. Right. But I mean, obviously the Stacey Abrams is the foregone conclusion. There's no opposition, maybe token opposition to Raphael Warnock. So there's opportunity for Democrats to come over, and I do find it interesting that they're not trying to cause mischief. Whereas it sounds like, we mentioned Pennsylvania earlier. It sounds like Democrats spent money trying to orchestrate it to get the candidate for governor that they wanted, Mastriano or whatever his name. Sorry for not accurately pronouncing his name, but the guy who eventually became the nominee. So they
Loafer Spurs.
Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And I guess I'm a little surprised that Democrats in Georgia aren't doing that. They do seem to be, at least as you mentioned, the ones that Patricia Murphy talked to, and then others on Twitter just saying, yeah, I was one of those. I voted because I don't want any Trump candidate to win anywhere. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
Development.
Yeah.
But some of the Democrats in Georgia are openly lamenting the loss of those voters because these voters would only be eligible to run in a Republican runoff and not a Democratic runoff.
Yeah.
You have several very tight races that will likely go to Democratic runoffs, including that of the Secretary of State nominee, which has been a tight race and not likely for any of those candidates to get over the 50% hurdle.
Sure.
And State's Rep. Terry Anulowicz pointed that out on Twitter, and she was responded to by B. Wynn, who's one of the candidates for the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State, saying, I need every vote I can get. So she's out there trying to keep Democrats voting Democrat. right?
Yes.
So, and so they do lose that chance to pick their own nominees and maybe find the winning candidate for their side. But they're sacrificing that in order to try to stop Trump. And I don't know if it'll work or if it, but if the margin for any of these races is 16,000, can you imagine the chaos that's going to cause on our side?
No doubt about it. So, but I think, look, I mean, the mantra you hear from Democrats, especially Democrats in Washington, is that they have to save democracy. They're the only ones who can save democracy. And the way you save democracy is stop Donald Trump and stop the people that he supports. So, probably these 16,000 have bought into that rhetoric. It's probably more now. Nice's article was a few days ago, but they've bought into that rhetoric and are out there trying to save democracy. So,
and frankly, Nice probably planted the seed of an idea for thousands of more Democrats who may want to cross over.
I mean, the most famous thing like this. Well, I guess two things. There was Republicans, way back when Cynthia McKinney was just embarrassing Georgia left and right. Republicans in large numbers joined with moderate Democrats in DeKalb County to vote out Cynthia McKinney and replace her in Congress. It wasn't Hank Johnson. It was, what was her name? Denise Majette. Denise Majette was the lady who, a Democrat beat her. So you've seen this before because Rush Limbaugh years ago was urging Republicans to go vote. He called it Operation Chaos, and try to keep. I guess it might have been. See, I may have this wrong, but maybe it was vote for Hillary Clinton because Barack Obama was beating her, or maybe it was Bernie against Hillary. I can't remember which one, but Operation Chaos. And it actually had some tangible effect. So
it did. It's a little bit anyway. You know who participated in Operation Chaos was State Representative Mandy Ballinger.
Really?
She pulled the Democratic ballot. And also, I believe State Representative Alan Peake did the same thing that year. Alan has been known to pull Democratic ballots, even though he's a conservative Republican, from time to time to mess around with the local elections down in Mick and Bibb.
Yeah.
But State Representative Mandy Ballinger back then, she was just a regular citizen, a Republican voter who decided after listening to Rush Limbaugh, I'm going to participate in Operation Chaos. So she pulled a Democratic ballot and she voted in the Democratic presidential primary, which became a campaign issue. But she ended up winning without a runoff against four other people. It didn't hurt her here in deep red Cherokee County, but it was something that she had to answer for.
Yeah.
So whenever you do that, if you have eyes on future office, just recognize at some point,
right, it might come.
Somebody's going to call you on it. Your voting record is out there. It's public data, and they're going to see that you voted in a primary that was opposite of the party that you say you're running for. And it will be an issue. Now, to Mandy's defense and to her credit, she immediately said, I was just doing what Rush Limbaugh told me to do.
Right.
And here in Cherokee County, that's a winning argument, right? Rush was very popular here.
And she probably wasn't alone. There are probably other Cherokeans who did the same thing.
Absolutely, because Rush Limbaugh said to go do it. So, Operation Chaos, our Georgia version 2.0, happening now in the Republican gubernatorial primary. So, Buzz, we talked about this over the weekend. WSB published bogus election results on their website.
Yes.
Oh, my. I mean, and it was obvious that it wasn't real live. But I mean, my first glance, when a mutual friend of us sent us the text, and I saw it, and I freaked out. Yeah. Right. I was like, how in the world, and I didn't say the world, I used more colorful language, did this happen? Right. How did they have access to this data? Because it said live election results on the WSB.TV or WSB TV News website, live election results, and it was the flashing red live button, the little throbbing thing in the corner, and I'm like, holy smokes. A cursory glance at the data, though, showed that every single race, Republican and Democrat, and we knew that we had hundreds of thousands of people vote. We knew what that number was, and it didn't match the number that we know of the total number of people voted.
Right.
And the races were all skewed. You had candidate for 6th district who is likely going to make a runoff, and Rich McCormick had something like 1% of the vote in one of these totals. But all the numbers were the same, 347,000 for each race.
Yeah.
Republican or Democrat. We know more people have voted Republican than they have Democrat, and it's impossible really for the top of the ticket to match the bottom of the ticket in total number of votes cast. So it was obvious that it wasn't real data. Right. It was obvious that somebody over there was doing a test run of their website to make sure they were ready and set up on Tuesday, so that when the data got fed in, it got reported correctly on their website.
Yep.
But did you get any reaction from any of the other candidates? Did you hear anybody out there freaking out and saying this is a scandal and this is, tell me about that. So
I heard from a person, I'm not going to name any names because I'm not, this candidate didn't buy into it, but he was, one of his campaign workers was at an event representing this candidate, and our beloved Candace Taylor was there, cornered the supporter of this candidate, and said, she was going to call this out. This was the vote results have been leaked, and she was all over it. And if you think that she's only got 5% of the vote, you better think again, because she's got way more than that. Everybody knows it, knows the polls are lying, and this is, there. Well, so the person called me, and I said, I mean, this happens, this happens at least once every election cycle. Some news outlet somewhere, they're building the structure by which they're going to display election results. They put in fake numbers. What always puzzles me is why don't they just have a default thing that says disclaimer? These are not real numbers. We're setting things up. We're getting ready.
Right.
Because I noticed last night, oddly enough, I like Decision Desk HQ. I like the way they do things, and they have the way they report election data. On every single page that Decision Desk has, there's a disclaimer at the bottom that says, if there are numbers in here and the polls are not closed, ignore it because it's not real. So how hard,
WSB.
We got to chide our friends at WSB that, I get it. This stuff happens. Put a daggum disclaimer on there when you're working on it, when you're setting it up, put a disclaimer on there saying this is not real data. Because, and I happened to see a video of Candace Taylor. When did this happen? So maybe the next day, it would have been the next day. And she was saying, they already leaked the data. And if you think that I only got that many votes. So she's running with it. So she thinks it's real. It's just proof of the corruption and how Satan has grabbed a hold of everything. Oh
my gosh. So I think what hurt her feelings probably more than anything was and the mock-up data that WSB was using. Catherine Davis was ahead of her.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that probably is like, hey, no, I'm the number one crazy person in this race. Everybody knows it.
Yes.
Catherine Davis is the second place crazy person.
Right.
I'm going to come in first when it comes to crazy people.
Yes.
Right. Come on, Candace, get real. Have some find some reality to ground to, right?
Yeah.
It was stupid at WSB.
Right.
But it's very clear what was going on.
Well, and not only that,
WSB, it was one line of code.
Yes.
It's one line of code that you can comment out for the disclaimer. It wasn't there.
Right.
It's malpractice on your part.
Yep.
You have fueled Candace Taylor and other people who think like her, who want to see a conspiracy theory in everything. You have fueled that by being that irresponsible.
And look, we know that no votes have been counted yet. None. No envelope of an absentee ballot has been opened. It is illegal to do so. The machines, if you go to the early voting place like I did yesterday and you did today, Scott, the machine is there. The ballots are in those giant bins where the counting machine sits on top of it. Nobody knows anything right now. And so there is no data to leak.
Well,
Yeah.
I do believe they can start opening the absentee ballots a week early now.
Yeah, you're right.
To offset the flood. So
Yeah.
they can start, but they're not
But
allowed
not
to
300,000 of them.
And
right.
the people who, and so the people who count those are not allowed legally to leak anything.
Right.
But all you had to do was look at the total number of votes cast in each race to recognize that they matched, and therefore it was impossible that those were the results. Stop being dumb, WSB. You're making dumb people dumber. And this is why people don't trust the media. Talking about something else that people are placing their trust in, and the conspiracy theories that are presented in 2000 Mules. You got to watch that, didn't you?
I did. A friend sent me a link. Yep.
And so I have been meaning to, but the more I'm hearing about it, the less I want to, because the state election board has addressed several of the concerns raised. They have investigated several of the theories that have been raised and the so-called evidence, and they've debunked a lot of it. And we're going to start by talking about the claim in the movie that they helped solve the murder for Sequoia Turner. It was an 8-year-old girl who got shot tragically during the race violence that plagued Atlanta during the summer of 2020. Her mother pulled into the wrong Wendy's parking lot, and somebody opened fire on her vehicle. Young African-American girl lost her life that day. It took them a long time, but they finally did find 2 suspects and charged them with murder. And then after that, along comes True the Vote saying, we found the cell phone data for these people, and they turned it over to the police and claimed that they're the reason why they found these guys. But it turns out they had already arrested and charged them with murder by the time the True the Vote got around to it. So how big was that part of the movie, Buzz?
It was a small part. What they were trying to do was prove, they're trying to lay the groundwork with D'Souza is questioning the people from True the Vote, and the conversation is around how accurate is this cell phone data that you have that you can track people on. What are the, is it precise locations? And that this was something that True the Vote offered up to say it is rock solid accurate. Law enforcement uses this kind of data all the time, and in fact we did it. And then they lay out their case that their claim that they helped solve the murder of young Sequoia Turner. And now, of course, as people are checking that out, and exactly what you said, Scott, it was months. First of all, they not only did they claimed they provided it. I may have the dates wrong, but in October, the arrests had been made months earlier. So even if they did turn data over, but then media is calling the GBI because that's who they said they gave the data to, and GBI is saying, we have no record of that ever happening. So it's not even clear that they even passed any data along to anybody, as they claim in the film. So there you go. That's I mean, to me, that's a blow to their credibility, in my pretty serious one in my mind. If you're going to put that on film, and you're going to allow that to be filmed, which they were a major backers of D'Souza's picture, that seems like a big whopper to stick in there.
Well, it doesn't stop there, because the state election board went on to investigate other claims, specifically of ballot stuffing and people taking multiple ballots to ballot boxes to drop them off. In the movie, at one point, they show a man with 5 ballots pull up in a vehicle and get out and drop 5 ballots into a ballot box. And they show the video. The GBI and the state elections board were able to see the video unedited and see that there was a license plate on the vehicle that was legible. And they went and found that person, and they interviewed him. And what they found was one guy who had 3 adult children still at home who were all voting age, allowed to vote. And as a family member under Georgia law, he was allowed to take their ballots to the drop box and drop them off. And that's what he did.
Yeah.
So how big was that particular scene in the movie. And
yeah, it was big. I mean, they had numerous. Yeah, they had numerous, lots of footage of people walking up to ballot boxes. Some in broad daylight, some in the middle of the night, and these people were putting. Some of them pull. One guy rides up on a bicycle, pulls some ballots out of his backpack and puts it in there, and it was all cast as very suspicious. And look, sure, somebody coming at 3:47 a.m., you're going to kind of, why are you doing it then? That's weird. But there's all sorts of reasonable explanations for that, right? Maybe he's on his way to work. Maybe he might work early in the morning. He might have to be at work at 4 a.m. or whatever. So I think, and this is, I think, Ben Shapiro, right? Ben Shapiro's skepticism about the film includes that. You're showing this footage. You're making these claims. They never show, they make the allegations that there were in Georgia 242 mules and 2,000 of what they call mules across the United States. Yet they had zero video proof of, okay, here's this person at this drop box. Here's this same person dropping more ballots at a different drop box. If you really, so they did not present that evidence at all. And that caused a guy like Ben Shapiro to say, hey, wait a minute, you have this stuff. See, that's a giant leap from here's somebody putting more than one ballot in a ballot box to every single one of those ballots is illegal, and tens of thousands of D'Souza's math in the film says that there were at least 30,000 illegally cast ballots in the state of Georgia as a result of these mules, and more than enough to turn over the election. So that's a giant leap from somebody putting more than one ballot in the ballot box to the election was stolen and therefore Georgia belongs in the Trump column. So,
and it's important to note that even if the ballots were illegally harvested, the remedy for ballot harvesting in Georgia is to prosecute the mule in this case, not the voter. And it is also not to invalidate the vote.
Yeah.
So you can't throw the votes out because somebody else broke the law. Yeah. The mule is the criminal in Georgia, not the voter. And that voter's right to cast a ballot under Georgia law then and now is still protected. Yeah. So that's an important point, I think, to make.
Yeah.
You had something else?
I went into this. I know I get accused all the time by Republicans on, they hound me on Facebook and other social media that I just reject all evidence. I don't. We know ballot harvesting happens. We know it does, and it's illegal, and it should be illegal. And I'm glad that Georgia in SB 202 strengthened that law to make that the case. So I went into this with an open mind. Really did. And Dinesh D'Souza is a brilliant filmmaker. He lays out a very compelling case that this was an organized effort. But Ben Shapiro, and if you saw, Eric Erickson sent out I don't know if it was on today's show or yesterday's show, poked even more holes in these claims. And I think there are some glaring problems with this. We just mentioned some. Another one is essentially what True the Vote and D'Souza are saying is that all these mules, these people were going from, they show up at a nonprofit organization, and that's where they pick up all these ballots that have been harvested, and then they carry them to ballot boxes. They never name a single organization that's supposedly located at all these addresses that they have. They never provide the address, and maybe that's for security reasons. But, if there are hundreds of organizations across Metro Atlanta who are harvesting these ballots, where's the list of these people? What organizations were they? And where's the proof that they were actually harvesting these ballots to give to these mules? And that's not presented in the film. So I think that's another hole. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the biggest hole for me. True the Vote refuses to cooperate with the GBI
Yep.
so the GBI can investigate their claims.
Yep. For a
And I
long period
think
of time.
the reason
right?
why,
Yep.
and
A
I'm
long
just going to
period of time
call,
been refusing.
I'm going to engage in some wild speculation here and say the reason why is because they're making money, keeping the conspiracy theories going. And if they do cooperate with the GBI, the investigation will come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Any claim that there hasn't been an investigation is false at this point,
Right?
because the state election board has investigated several different allegations made in the film. They have not been able to find the evidence to back up the claims and support the claims made in the film. They've debunked several of them flat out, which calls into credibility the rest of it. So we got to go through each claim individually now. True the Vote claims to have the evidence. They claim to have the witness. They have a patriotic duty to cooperate, and they're not. They're grifters. And they're preying upon the passions of people who desperately want to see Donald Trump as their president. They're preying on them. They're grifting in the worst way, the most unpatriotic way. Just do your duty as an American citizen and cooperate with the GBI. Let's put this to bed. Yeah. You guys are over there in Texas pointing fingers at us over here in Georgia. You and the horse you rode in on, sir. You and the horse you rode in on. Do your American patriotic duty, and let's get this done.
Yeah.
Let's finish this.
Right. Because look, ridiculous. I mean, I think, Scott, I think you would agree with me. If there were people who harvested ballots, then I want those folks arrested. I want the book thrown at them, because I want our elections. I want every voter, left, right, or center, to have confidence that when they cast a ballot, whether it's through the mail or in a drop box or at a voting machine, that they have absolute confidence that their vote was counted and their voice was heard, and that the winner is elected fairly. I mean, Scott, I've said this before, every time at virtually every campaign stop in 2018 when I ran for Secretary of State, I talked about how my concern that's growing numbers of people on the left and the right who just do not trust the results of the election. And if that continues, we have serious problems. And so True the Vote,
it's a real threat to democracy. Right.
It absolutely is. It's how banana republics become banana republics. And if True the Vote, has this data, yes, it's compelling. We need to look at it. We need to investigate it. And it has, as you pointed out, Scott, it is being investigated and has been investigated. Produce the daggum witness, right? You're obstructing.
Yep.
You've gone beyond. You're obstructing, and it's a shame, because it absolutely should. How are we going to restore confidence if we can't ever get to the bottom of this stuff, because people won't produce witnesses that they claim to have?
And it's not like Georgia doesn't have its own real election problems. We have a race right now. Segue. We have a race right now, a state Senate race, District 52, which is part of Bartow County, part of Floyd County, a deeply conservative part of the state, that has an incumbent, Chuck Hufstetler, who has two opponents running against him. After redistricting, there were a couple guys who were interested in running. They found themselves in Senator Hufstetler's seat. And so one of them had already declared he was running for what he thought was an open seat to replace Bruce Thompson. In the Senate, his name is Derek Keeney. And then you have former state representative Jeff Lewis, who has served on Georgia DOT board and has remained involved in his community even after he lost to Paul Battles a decade or more ago. But there was a problem with Jeff Lewis, who had raised a ton of money and had an active campaign account when he left office. He stopped filing his campaign disclosures, and he never terminated his campaign. State law in Georgia requires a campaign to zero out and then terminate, to release the candidate from the requirements to periodically report what they have, cash on hand, contributions received, and expenditures. A retiring state rep or senator can use money that's left over for various things. They can donate to other campaigns. They can return the money to their donors. They can give it to charity. They can't give it to themselves unless they've loaned money to their campaign. They can pay themselves back. But there's limited number of ways that they can use that money. But until you file the declaration of this campaign is dead, until you file that piece of paperwork, you are required by law to periodically report. And we've seen other legislators have this problem. Chip Rogers famously had a couple $100,000 when he left as Senate Majority Leader, and he stopped filing, as an example. Well, the state legislature this year passed a law that said that if you are going to run for office, you have to be up to date on your campaign disclosures. Otherwise, you're disqualified. Since Jeff Lewis had spent 10 years not filing campaign disclosures on an open campaign account from his state house days, Chuck Hofstadler took him to court under the new law. And this judge last Friday decided, with only 14 or so voting days left, we're going to kick Jeff Lewis off the ballot, even though early voting's already started and Jeff Lewis has already received votes. So we're going to disenfranchise everybody that's voted for Jeff Lewis. We're going to kick him off the ballot. And so it'll be a race between Chuck Hofstadler and Derek Keeney now. And so sorry if you already voted for Jeff Lewis. How crazy can this be? I mean, so there's several problems here, right, Buzz? There's the fact that people have already cast their ballots. There's people who wanted to cast their ballots. And now Jeff Lewis is saying, I don't think it's constitutional. I don't think the legislature can put these types of restrictions.
Yeah. Look, how do you I'm not a lawyer, but I think Jeff Lewis has a point. I mean, the judges are very reluctant historically to toss people off the ballot. And courts have, there have been attempts in other ways over the years and also all over the country to do these sorts of things to prevent people from being on the ballot. And courts, nope, you have a right to run for office. You have a constitutional right to run for office, and you need to be very careful in tossing people off the ballot. We saw that a few weeks ago with Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? She is allowed to remain on the ballot.
Right.
But yeah, so I think it'll be interesting. But the problem is the immediacy of it, as you pointed out, Scott. Votes have been cast. The election is over next Tuesday. So what do you do? And
well,
it's a mess.
I'm going to pull out my crystal ball, and we'll give it a little shine, rub it down, and look in. Oh yeah, this is going to be a redo.
Yeah.
This is so screwed up.
Yeah.
It took the judge 40 something days to make a decision. He waited until ballots had already been cast. And it's going to be a redo. I guarantee you, it is not unprecedented for judges to tell the state you have to rerun an election from start to finish.
Sure.
And so I predict that this will be redone. The state constitution has some requirements for eligibility to run for legislature, and they require basically your citizenship and your residency and your age. Mm-hmm. And then there's some things that disqualify you, like if you get arrested for a felony and you're adjudicated as guilty,
right,
involving moral turpitude. And also if you get called up to active duty, if you're a reservist that gets called to active duty, you have to resign. And actually,
isn't there
that part of the Constitution allows the legislature to tweak that, and it has been tweaked to allow for active duty people to serve, but they just don't get paid. Mm-hmm. But here's other persons not eligible to hold office is in Article 2, Paragraph 3, and the last sentence says additional conditions of eligibility to hold office for persons elected on a write-in vote and for persons holding offices or appointments of honor or trust other than elected offices created by this Constitution may be provided by law. Mm-hmm. That does not include whether or not somebody is up to date on their financial disclosures.
Yeah.
So Jeff Lewis, I think, is going to have a solid argument to say, time out, start the clock over, redo. Mulligan, I'm calling Mulligan. Let's get a fresh election.
Yeah. So it's also, isn't it, Scott, thinking back to the oath that we took when we were sworn in, and one of the things we say we swear an oath to the Georgia Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, but that we're not the holder of public funds. And I think at times that's been interpreted that you're not behind on your taxes.
Right.
But I don't know that it's prevented somebody from taking office or being on the ballot. I think it's more of you got to pay this right now. So,
the holder of public funds provision. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that, it might be a case where, he may have to pay a big fine, Jeff Lewis, I'm talking about, before he can take office, or before he can be sworn in, should he win. I mean, he's got to win. But
Well,
yeah, I think we're headed for
the constitutional provision. Yeah, the constitutional provision about not holding public funds allows for a payment plan.
Yeah.
So if you're even if you do owe taxes, if you're on a payment plan, you're eligible to take office. If you hold fines in this case, you're eligible if you work out a payment plan, or if you're in the process of working out a payment plan.
Yeah.
You're eligible to run for office. Yeah, Jeff Lewis, Derek Keeney, Chuck Hufstetler, enjoy running 2.0 version of your race, because that's I am predicting with great certainty that when this gets to an actual appellate judge, they're going to say start over, and I think that's what we're heading towards. We're gonna talk about one more thing before we wrap up, and that's predictions.
Yes,
we're running out of time, so we're heading to Tuesday. Mm-hmm. What are your predictions for Tuesday, Buzz?
Yeah, so I think I think Brian Kemp's going to win without a runoff. You want to take this like race by race? Yeah, you want. So all right, I think we're both in agreement.
Top of the ticket.
Yeah. I think Brian Kemp wins without a runoff. I'm gonna be optimistic because I think the momentum's headed his way. I think Kemp's gonna wind up. I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna say he's gonna be 60%. I'm just gonna be bold and put that marker down there.
Goodness, I'm taking the under on that.
Of the vote.
I'm taking the under. I'm at 54.
All right.
LG's race.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I have no idea on the Democratic side. I really don't. On the Republican side, on the Democratic side, I'm interested to see, Renita Shannon, we both serve with her. She is running as an unabashed progressive. How big is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party? How much influence can they exert, and can they get her into a runoff? Because it's probably headed for a runoff. So that'll be interesting. And on the Republican side, man, I don't know. I think it's going to be extremely close. And so I think they're going to avoid a runoff, but I think it might be somebody might win it with just over 50%. So I'm gonna go with Burt Jones. I think it's going to be extremely close, and wouldn't shock me if Butch Miller wins it either.
Yeah, Butch has made a strong push. He's been on media, at least in my market. We'll see what happens. I'm going to call that a 50-50 toss-up. I don't have my crystal ball is cloudy there.
Yeah.
How about AG?
I think Chris Carr. I think it's not even close. I think Patrick Witt. John
Gordon's running in that race.
John Gordon. What? Yeah. See, who even cares? I think John Gordon. He'll be lucky to get 28%. I think Chris Carr just smashes him.
Yeah, I think so too. I'll put that at 70%. The John Gordon signs I've seen here is the Trump endorsed John Gordon. So I think that's worth 30 points.
He may have legally changed his name to that, so
he may have. Secretary of State, what do you got?
Oh, wow. I think it's going to, excuse me. I think it's going to be a runoff with Raffensperger and Heiss, but I think Raffensperger is going to do better than people think. I think he's going to finish first. I think he's going to be close to 40%. So I'm going to plant my flag there. I think Brad's going to get 40% of the vote and finish in first place.
I'm going to say that Jody Heiss gets 38% and Brad Raffensperger gets 30%. And the rest of the candidates, David Bile ran a strong campaign last time, made the runoff.
Yeah.
He's not
got a lot of name
well,
ID. Yep.
But his name ID is still out there. And as much as I dislike his campaign, he has been campaigning hard.
Sure.
And he has that GMA connection. So we got time for one more, and then we're going to have to wrap. So let's pick U.S. Senate.
All right. So, the easy answer is to say that Herschel just runs away with it, right? But
no pun intended.
Yeah. Let's go. Heck, let's go crazy. Let's say that Herschel's at 49.5, and he's in a runoff with Latham Sadler.
Wow. You know, I do think Latham
Sorry,
has
Gary.
been surging.
I think Gary could get in a runoff too, but yeah.
I think he has been surging, but I think it's Herschel's without a runoff, unfortunately. Well, listen, this has been a great show. Thank you for listening to the Peach Pundit podcast. Again, thank you to Sam Thomas, Benjamin Hurst, Reed Powell for being our Patreon subscribers. You too can support this podcast by subscribing at patreon.com/peachpundit. We love you guys. And whatever happens between now and Tuesday, on Wednesday, all of us are going to have to come together to support our candidates to defeat Stacey Abrams come November. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Later.